Thank you very much, Dame Diana. It's great to be joining you here today at the launch of this important report and corresponding website. I'm honoured to have been invited to speak alongside the expertise of today's panel, and I'd like to thank Dame Diana, the APPG and UK Feminista for their commitment to addressing these important issues. In my late teens, I was exploited through prostitution in London, and then trafficked to a prostitution ring in the Middle East. Over the past 25 years, I've had the great privilege of helping hundreds of women exit prostitution and rebuild their lives. During those years, I never met one woman who didn't want to get out. Prostitution is inherently harmful and you cannot make it safe. My own experience in what was ridiculously termed high-class prostitution, run by an agency that was referred to as the safest in London. And I can tell you that there's nothing high-class about getting raped or having bite marks on my face or being asked at gunpoint if my mum knew where I was and if I'd like to see her again. The location of the surroundings do not reduce the impact of what is experienced, and we must dismiss the false narrative around women and girls choosing prostitution. Prostitution chooses women and girls, and demand creates prostitution and trafficking. As we've heard, sexual exploitation and sex trafficking in the UK is at epidemic proportions, and profiteers, pimps and organised crime groups also use adult websites to create a mainstream market to sell women for sex. It's huge business, and these websites incentivize that and make it easy. They encourage violence against women by doing so, and for wider society, they perpetuate harmful stereotypes and gender equality. We must seek to actively eradicate commercial sexual exploitation, holding perpetrators to account and providing sustainable exit routes for the women and girls whose vulnerabilities are exploited as they are funneled into the dehumanising system of prostitution. I want the UK to adopt the Nordic model, legislation which completely decriminalises those selling sex and provides that exiting support, and where sex buyers, pimps, traffickers and third-party facilitators who create the demand are criminalised. Traffickers and pimps are willing to take the risks because of the sizable profits, but they also want to reduce risks where they can so that their crimes can carry on uninterrupted. Evidence shows that they will favour operating in countries where the demand is not tackled by the criminal justice system. Currently, the UK is good for organised crime. Full decriminalisation means the whole of the sex industry is decriminalised, so pimps and sex buyers are legitimised as managers and clients and present what is exploitation as work, even framing it around human rights. I can't think of a job where you need a detailed exit plan to leave or where daily you risk physical, emotional and sexual violence. Also, when you're legally recognised as a worker, you also then have legal obligations. In systems where prostitution is legalised or fully decriminalised, you could be criminally sanctioned through fines for not meeting these obligations. It's only the Nordic model framework where women are completely decriminalised. Those describing themselves as independent, empowered sex workers who have chosen this supposed work constitute a minuscule minority of those in the sex trade. We know that the vast majority of women in the UK sex trade are not UK nationals. The reality of prostitution is that there are nearly always underlying issues that create the conditions of that vulnerability. Most women and girls' routes into prostitution have been paved with these underlying issues that contribute to a pathway of vulnerability that includes a lack of choice, poverty, displacement by wars, childhood sexual abuse, neglect, addiction, or coercive and controlling relationships. That's why we must rid ourselves of this false dichotomy we're continually presented with, that of course sex trafficking is bad, but prostitution is a choice and a job. Both rely on gender inequality and vulnerability. Both are inherently harmful, trapping girls and women in a violent and predatory system. Both are fueled by demand, and often it's the same men paying. When I think of my own experiences, I never separated out my experience in prostitution in London and my experience of being trafficked overseas, because my body and my psyche did not experience those things in different ways. The more demand you have in a country, the bigger the sex industry, and the bigger the sex industry, the larger the scale of sex trafficking. As we've heard, we've got 20 years of evidence now from Sweden where the demand is very low. The Swedish police and Interpol agree that Sweden is almost a dead market for trafficking, for sexual exploitation because of that low demand. Since Sweden brought these laws in 1999, there has not been one murder of a woman related to prostitution. Germany's figures are in sharp contrast. Between 2000 and 2017, there have been 86 murders and 35 attempted murders documented. That's only the ones that we know about. And year on year, the percentages of foreign women continue to go up and up. Of those murdered or attempted murder victims from 2010 to 18, now 60.7% are foreign women, with the most common countries of origin being Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary, UK and Poland, and that tells us a lot. In the mega brothels of Germany, it's legal and seen as a job. In each room there's a panic button. There have been 13 known murders or attempted murders in those legal, government-sanctioned premises where you would be hard-pressed to find any German nationals. It is beyond my comprehension when organisations or individuals can have it right and understand the oppression and exploitation that women as a class are vulnerable to on issues such as female genital mutilation, domestic violence, and even on sex trafficking. But when it comes to prostitution, it's suddenly only about work and labour rights. Do we apply this to children in poverty? No, of course not. There is a trade in human organ trafficking. Should we support a commercial trade in organs? No. Neither should we then just have this acceptable category of exploitation for women in poverty. And if it is a job like any other, then it's certainly not one that alleviates poverty, but more often than not, it traps women there, often in debt or under control. Opponents will say it will drive things underground. It won't. As has been pointed out, by its very nature, prostitution needs a way to supply the demand to the sex buyer. They'll say it'll clear out all the good sex buyers and leave the dangerous ones. It won't. And the myth of the good punter is just that, a myth. Steve White, as we knew here in the UK in Ipswich, was a regular known by many of the women. It did not stop him murdering 5 of them. Here are 2 quotes from regular German sex buyers compiled by Manu Schoen, a German sociologist at the height of COVID-19 last year, that highlight attitudes towards already exploited women. Sex buyer 8, clubs and brothels will not be reopened anytime soon. We were afraid of the Nordic model, now we get the COVID model, zero prostitution. Sex buyer 6, at the moment they are all scared. Usually here in the Bremen area, you need to pay €200 when ordering someone to your place. I only paid €130. The whores need money, so they make it for less money to have customers at all. Opponents say, you won't be able to vet sex buyers. They can't vet them now. You cannot tell who's going to be violent or kill you, and many women have no say in who the sex buyer is. Once you're in that car or behind that closed door, you're extremely vulnerable to violence and sexual exploitation. Women and girls have a human right to live a life free from violence and exploitation, and for us in the UK to be a progressive nation where our girls and boys grow up in a society where we have genuine equality. It is gender inequality that make women and girls vulnerable to sexual exploitation in the first place, and we will never have equality while men are able to pay for the use of women's bodies delivered behind the closed door, whether it's the door of a car or the door of a 5-star hotel. I have listened for over 25 years to women who have experienced being behind that closed door. I was behind that closed door, the door of 5-star hotels, the door of palaces, the door of diplomats' embassies. What's behind that door is entitled men who believe that paying affords them permission to do anything, to rape, to threaten, to instill fear. On many occasions, I wondered if and in what state I would be exiting from that door. We need a vision for the UK, a long-term vision that becomes a reality we can be proud of, a reality that rejects women being for sale with the inherent harm that results, a reality that addresses the demand by criminalising pimps, traffickers, website facilitators and sex buyers. This is far from a cost-free business, and that cost is being paid for by the abuse and exploitation of women, where they exist as objects, treated like a commodity, consumed and discarded. Our government needs to draw a firm line and robustly act on these realities in a way that means something tangible, where women and girls are provided with resourced and realistic options in order to get out of the sex trade and truly build the lives they would choose for themselves. In conclusion, the meetings and discussions we're having are not just an intellectual exercise. As we speak here today, that exploitation is happening right now to real people, a living hell in most cases. We need brave MPs and legislators who will not stand by in the face of the realities of prostitution and trafficking and do nothing about it. We cannot let them down. We need to do everything in our power to shut down the sex trade and the harm it inflicts, and we need to do it now. Thank you.